They tell you that a monster is born from darkness. They lie. A monster is born from the blinding white light of greed. Before the maze, before the hunger, and before the hero, there was a promise broken on the shores of Crete. King Minos, a man who built an empire on the back of the sea, asked the gods for a sign of his right to rule. He asked Poseidon for a miracle, and the Earthshaker delivered. Out of the churning foam of the Aegean rose a creature that defied the laws of biology, a bull of snow-white hide and eyes like polished obsidian. It was a gift meant to be returned to the divine through sacrifice, a simple transaction, power for a life. But Minos, looking at the beast, saw more than a sacrifice. He saw a trophy. He saw a breeding stock. He kept the god's bull and slaughtered a lesser animal from his own herd, thinking a god wouldn't notice a swap in the ledger. But you cannot cheat the sea. Poseidon did not strike the king's palace with a wave. He did not sink his fleet. He did something far more surgical. He reached into the mind of the queen, Pasiphae, and planted a divine itch. Imagine a lust that isn't yours, a biological command coming from the stars, forcing a refined royal woman to look at a beast with a hunger that scorched her throat. It was the first transformation of the story, not of the body, but of the soul. Pasiphae was a daughter of the sun, much like her sister Circe, but her magic was useless against a god's obsession. She was a prisoner in her own skin. She turned to the only man in Knossos who could turn a nightmare into a reality. Daedalus, the inventor, the man of cogs and wood. Under the cover of a moonless night, Daedalus built a hollow wooden cow, draped in the hide of a freshly killed heifer. It was a masterpiece of deception. Pasiphae climbed inside, her breathing shallow, her mind shattered as she waited for the white bull to approach. The gods do not care for consent, they care for symmetry, and so the curse was completed. When the child was born 9 months later, the palace of Knossos fell in silence. The midwives didn't bring the baby to the king for a blessing. They dropped their lamps and fled into the night. The baby was named Asterion, the star. He was beautiful and terrible. Below the neck, he had the soft pink skin of a prince, but rising from his shoulders was the heavy furred head of a calf call, with wide liquid eyes that seemed to hold the vastness of the ocean. He didn't cry like a human. He bellowed with a sound that vibrated the palace floorboards. For 3 years, the tragedy was a domestic one. Pasiphae, driven by a mix of maternal instinct and lingering curse, tried to raise him. She fed him milk from golden bowls. She brushed the soft white fur on his brow. She called him her little star. But as the boy grew, his teeth sharpened. The calf's innocence was replaced by a predator's weight. He began to crave the smell of iron, the smell of blood. Minos looked at the star and saw his own failure walking on 2 legs. Every time Asterion bellowed, it was a reminder that the king was a thief and a coward. The shame was a poison that leaked through the palace walls. The people whispered. The priests looked away. Minos couldn't kill the boy. To spill the blood of a divine curse was to invite a second, deadlier punishment. So he chose a solution that was more cruel than execution. He chose architectural erasure. "Build me a place where the sun cannot find him," Minos commanded Daedalus. "Build me a tomb that breathes." And so the Labyrinth was born, a masterpiece of geometry designed to confuse the human mind and trap the animal spirit. Miles of gray limestone, thousands of dead ends, and a center that felt like the bottom of a well. The day they moved Asterion was the last day he ever saw the sky. They didn't drag him, they led him. They used a trail of honey and bread, treating it like a game. The 3-year-old prince followed the guards into the cool, damp dark of the entrance, his small human hand trailing along the smooth stone walls. He reached the center, a grand circular room with a single high vent that showed a square of the blue Cretan sky. He sat down to eat his honey bread. Asterion didn't understand the sound at first. He called out for his mother. He called for the light. But the only answer was the echo of his own voice, bouncing back at him from 1,000 identical corners. Minos had hidden his shame. He had buried his sin. But in the dark, the honey bread ran out. The prince's stomach began to growl. And as the star began to fade into the blackness of the maze, the Minotaur began to wake up. In the silence, in the dark. But the labyrinth has a long memory, and the hunger is just beginning. Time is the second maze. It is longer than any corridor, and darker than any pit. Inside the labyrinth, the years did not pass in seasons. They passed in heartbeats and hunger. The boy who was once called Asterion, the star, began to fade. In the total absence of light, the eyes do not go blind, they adapt. They learn to see the heat of a mouse, the vibration of a moth, the slow, cold pulse of the stone itself. But a boy cannot survive on shadows. While Asterion rotted in the dark, King Minos thrived in the sun. He had turned his shame into a weapon. After brutal war with Athens, a war fueled by the death of his human son, Androgeus, Minos demanded a price that would ensure Athens never rose again. He didn't ask for gold, he didn't ask for land, he asked for the harvest. Every 9 years, a black-sailed ship would arrive at the docks of Knossos. On board were 14 of Athens' finest, 7 boys and 7 girls, chosen by lot, their lives discarded to pay a debt they never signed. To the people of Crete, it was a religious duty. To Minos, it was a waste disposal system. To the creature in the maze, it was the only time he felt alive. Imagine the psychological warfare of the stone corridors. The guards would lead the 14 youths to the bronze doors. They would strip them of their clothes, their weapons, and their hope. Then they would push them into the mouth of the stone. The doors didn't just lock, they sealed. For the first few hours, the youths would huddle together. They would try to keep their voices low, thinking that silence was a shield. But the labyrinth was designed to amplify sound. A sob in the east corridor sounded like a scream in the west. A prayer whispered in the dark became a roar by the time it reached the center. The beast would listen. He was no longer a boy. He was a mountain of scar tissue and muscle, standing 7 feet tall. His human torso had thickened until it was wide as an ancient oak, and his bull's head had grown massive, the horns polished to a lethal point by constant rubbing against the limestone walls. He didn't hunt like a lion. He hunted like a ghost.
He knew every dead end. He knew which tiles groaned and which corners held the deepest shadows. One by one, the Athenian children would wander off. Fear is a dehydrating force. It makes you move when you should stay still. They would separate in the dark, searching for an exit that didn't exist. And that is when the star would find them. There is a specific horror in being destroyed by something that still possesses a human hand. The beast didn't just gore them, he gripped them. He touched their faces with fingers that still remembered the warmth of a mother's touch, even as his bovine jaws tore into their life. It wasn't malice, it was the only form of connection he had left. To consume was to hold, to kill was to be seen. For 27 years, this was the rhythm of Knossos. 3 harvests, 42 lives. The labyrinth wasn't just a prison anymore. It was a temple of trauma. The walls were stained with the grease of human fat and the salt of tears. In the center of it all, the creature sat in the bones of his guests, his head bowed, his eyes staring up at that single square of blue sky he could never reach. He was the most powerful thing in Crete and the most pathetic. But the 4th harvest was coming, and this time the black-sailed ship carried something different. It carried a man who didn't fear the dark. It carried a man who brought a clue to the end of the world. A man who brought a thread that would lead not to a rescue, but to an execution. The blood and the bone are settled, but the thread is about to be pulled. And the beast is about to meet the only thing more dangerous than a monster, a hero.
The gods do not build cages, they build